Right. So I'm talking about collaboration from a different perspective. This is more from the perspective of researchers and others who might be collaborating with us on research projects. The traditional owner engagement part I see is hugely important aspect of these research projects, but I'm more focusing on our collaborations with researchers and particular tips for that. And I want to acknowledge the others who I've worked with on this in collaborating on collaboration. Kate within my team, who's sitting over there, as well as Peter Schofield from Queensland Department of Agriculture and Fisheries, and others elsewhere as well, in QDAF and elsewhere. So I do want to start by acknowledging the traditional owners of both the land on which we are today, but also throughout the Great Barrier Reef region where we operate. Apologies in advance. I like to communicate via memes, so this will not be the last you'll see in this presentation. I was also figuring that this time in the afternoon it might be help you to keep awake perhaps. So we're going to enter the magical world of collaboration now. And I do want to say that it's not just this presentation is not just focused on a one recent research project that went bad or anything like that. It's really about combined experience from myself from research projects for a number of years, as well as a number of others, people who've been working on research projects, and just some of the things that have come up for us. It's also from a government agency perspective, so acknowledge that there's work that both sides can do in collaboration, but I will be talking from my particular perspective. So before we're really starting, it's good to have a solid plan so that then you can build those foundations from that plan. And that includes an actual project plan, sometimes with objectives, method, deliverables, milestones, those sort of exciting things. And being really clear about that, including for researchers, is really handy if there's particular data that you're going to want from us, access to systems, anything that you're going to particularly need, expertise, those sort of things. If you're aware of it early, it's handy for us to know, just so that we can then account for that. There might be internal approvals and things that are required for that. Also seek to understand the context and legislative framework. So if you do that early, it really shows up in whatever's produced at the end to make sure those recommendations or anything that comes out of it are quite valid. Demonstrating the project's alignment with priorities is beneficial, particularly if you are proposing a project that you have. It can really then help it to get approved if you're able to do that. Acknowledging that formal agreements might be required if you are, if there's funding involved, obviously agreement required, but also for sharing of data, it requires an agreement depending on what sort of data it is. So in my particular area, compliance is a lot of sensitive data, might require a data sharing agreement for something like that. Also understanding the funding arrangements, and if you are requesting funding, to request that clearly, any other in-kind contributions that you have, or other funding that you already have, it's handy to have that in there as well. And this all helps us to have clarity on both sides so that you have a shared understanding and you're on the same track. And that you reach the destination that both are wanting to reach, that A isn't produced when B is what was actually wanted. Oh, sorry, I keep using the laser pointer. As I mentioned, a few more memes in here. So understanding who you're engaging with and their needs is important. It might be beneficial to understanding the decision-making, sort of the dynamics in the team, and the primary need is important as well. So, you know, how did the project come about? Really, what problem are you trying to solve? There's also often different experience levels in the team. So you might have people who are from a very technical background. There might be people who are from a communications background or, you know, very scientific background. And so to communicate at all of those levels is quite important. And to try and involve the whole team. Things like stakeholder mapping exercises might be useful in that, and to really map out who you need to engage with and exactly how you need to engage with them. So regular meetings can be beneficial. You might start more regularly, and then over time you might not need as many meetings, and it could be really beneficial to have it face-to-face at the start and then go to Teams or something else as you go along. It's important to be clear on the progress that's being made, and if there are any issues, to communicate those issues. And if you have potential solutions, then to provide those, or potentially you might provide other gains as well that you have. And this links into potentially adding value by connecting to other projects, or to being aware of or open to exploring new avenues. Sometimes people working on projects in the government agency might not necessarily know exactly what they want, what's possible. They might not, have the awareness that you do of what's out there. So sometimes, you can really end up doing some really cool things that start off as side projects, I guess. Recording stakeholder engagement can be beneficial, because then when you're implementing down the track, it can be useful to then, know whether more consultation is required prior to implementation. And this one is really just to say that to be like the coral polyp and to have a symbiotic relationship between the zooxanthellae and the polyp, they're working together. And that's to lead into the exciting aspect of reporting and milestones. It's very important though, from a managing agency perspective, and whatever you can do to make that easier for us is very helpful. So being clear and concise is handy. Bigger is not always better in regarding to reports, and noting that staff have competing priorities in the work that they're doing, and may have limited time to read reports. I'm not saying don't produce a good report, but that if you can make things in bite-sized chunks of information, set out clearly, dot points, key findings up front, easy to read, is beneficial. But sometimes, depending on the project, it might be useful to distill findings into messages that are easily understood by the public, if it is going to be communicated outwardly, that is. You also want to make sure you're limiting jargon, and not assuming prior knowledge, because noting that reports often go to people outside that sphere. You might be going to directors and other managers, and they won't have that same sort of knowledge of that area. So it might be to include a glossary, or also to really limit the jargon if you can. And figures are useful. I love a good figure, whether it's a graph or a picture or a flow chart, or whatever it is to help explain a big lot of content in a small sort of amount, that you can then share that onwards and help explain concepts, can be really handy. And sometimes those components are the parts that are shared the most, depending on what it is. And presentations to key stakeholders can be beneficial, both internal and external, particularly at the finalisation point, to help people understand. So another thing that's useful is something like a 30-second pitch or a short project summary, which might be part of a report that's upfront, just sort of an executive summary type, to really explain it easily, that you can then put, in a document or share with others easily to explain a project. It's also quite beneficial and important to remain objective and ensure that recommendations are justified, so not overreaching. Also understand that governments are weighing multiple options and multiple priorities. So there's issues with timing and budget and resourcing, those things. And sometimes phased options are beneficial if you present those, or, a variety of scaled options. And to make sure recommendations have, clear benefits and risks and the like. Also want to reiterate that it's obviously, I'm talking about researchers and that side of it, but obviously on the government side, we also have things that we need to do to ensure effective collaboration, and I try to do my part in that way, and I'm sure others do as well. And so the sloth is just to say thanks for hanging out with me.